All right, okay, we're gonna get going. We got a long meeting. Welcome everybody to the Wednesday, January 29th. Transportation Council. I'll start with introductions. Steve Beanie, Schenectady County.
Chris Wallen, City of Schenectady.
Greg Richard, DOT. Howard Global, City of Albany.
Tom Houlihan, City of Rensselaer.
Mike Butler, City of Mechanical.
Kim Lambert, Sarasota County.
Karen Butler, City of Rose.
Like Q3, City of Saratoga Springs.
Mike Williams, CDTA.
Andrew Kreshek, City of Troy.
Mark Castiglione, Regional Planning.
Ethan Townsend, Transportation Council.
Andrew Tracy, Transportation Council.
Sandy Missowitz with the Transportation Council.
Shannon Ford Walton.
Joe Peregrine, Town of Colony. Tom Romano, Town of Colony.
Brad, FHWA.
Guy Tedesco, Mike Modat, Thruway Authority. Johnson,
Okay, and then listening virtually, we have Parker Morris from the Transportation Council, David Nelson from the Transportation Council, Adam McCarville from the Transportation Council, Bob Rice from FCM Engineering, Ed Snyder from GPI, Emily Laughlin from CDTA. Wow, this is bouncing around, sorry. Ayla Shermer from FTA. And I said Emily Laughlin, David Yang, I'm sorry, I didn't say that, pronounce that correctly, from CHA. Randy Milano from DOT. Someone is identifying as Scott, is this Scott Rice? If you could just put in the chat who Scott is. Teresa LaSalle from the Transportation Council, Tim Lane from Village of Manans. Someone named Gemma Comenzo, if you could put your affiliation in the chat, that would be great. Might be Peter. Jamie O'Neill from the town of Malta, Josh Giller from the town of East Greenbush. If I missed anybody online, it is Scott Rice from the Village of Scotticoke. Thanks, Scott. If I missed anybody, please put your name in the chat. I think that is it.
Thank you, Sandy. No one registered to speak, excuse me. So administration previous meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the previous meeting minutes of January 8th? Second, further discussion? All those in favor, aye. Anyone opposed, abstain? Thank you, motion carries. Moving on, action items, 22 tip amendment. Greg, you're gonna present this one.
Yes, so this one is a tip amendment to draw down the regional bridge preservation. Usually it's a multi-county set aside that we put projects together that cross the entire 8 counties of the region. We put a project out for bridge preservation recently and received no bids, twice. So to try to get smaller contractors to bid, we're splitting the project out into various pieces. One piece is to preserve some of the I-77 viaduct on Broadway. And we're looking to spin this project off at a value of around $1.2 million by drawing down the Transportation Council set aside for bridge preservation. So you can see in the 5-year program, we have 42 million in bridge preservation plan funding. We're drawing that down to make a site-specific project on 787 to fund this one site. Long and short of this tip amendment. Any questions?
No impact on what we're about to do today, Cindy.
This one has no impact, and this is amending the current tip.
Yeah, and we're gonna obligate this very, very soon, so it won't roll into.
Are you maxing the set aside withdrawal?
Yeah, the set aside's all match funds, so 1.2 is, it's all matched dollars.
Greg? Further questions? I need a motion to approve this drawdown RG 134 for I-787. Can I get a motion?
Second.
For the discussion, all those in favor, aye. When opposed, abstain, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the UPWP, right? Sandy, is that what it is?
Yes, I'm gonna try to go through this fairly quickly in the interest of time, and I've been talking about this already. So the Unified Planning Work Program, I mean, many of you have been here a while, know that this is our work plan for the upcoming fiscal year that begins April 1st. It includes all the planning work that our staff will be conducting, that we're gonna use for consultants, describes the timeframes, the cost, the fund sources. It's one of our federally required documents. In terms of how we put it together, we had a call for projects released back in October. With a workshop that came along with that. As of December 6th, we received 3 applications. As we previously discussed, we have funding in place to fund all 3 of those proposals, so I'll talk about that. DOT issued us guidance on how to put this together. No real significant changes to last year. I just provided on the slide the the allocation estimates for our major fund sources. So the federal highway PL funds, those are our planning funds. Very slight increase over last year. The PL set aside, we nicknamed it's kind of specific to complete streets types projects, really a safety. We've kind of nicknamed it complete streets, but officially it's like the safety set aside. So we have that allocation, and then the FTA Metropolitan Planning Program funds are planning funds we get from the Federal Transit Administration to complete our work. And again, those get reset usually in April, when official numbers come out from the FTA. The FTA funding looks a little different than the federal highway funding. In terms of what's in the UPWP, broken down by our task ID numbers. The first group of activities really relates to the operations of the MPO, managing our statewide contract for consultant assistance for our association. We have our environmental justice report that we're going to be updating post-tip as part of our Title VI requirements. We're going to be assessing the impact of our public participation plan, and probably the most important thing for you folks in the room is continuing our on-demand technical assistance program in partnership with CDRPC. That includes, traffic counts, staff assistance on little planning activities, or a whole range of things. The next group is sort of some of our, I'll call it data-oriented activities. Our data collection vendor. So you may remember we have a vendor on retainer for traffic counts, bicycle and pedestrian counts, all kinds of counts. That's available to all of you for free. Take a while last. Eco counters, we also do trail counts. So if you need trail counts in your community, we have count equipment that can specifically count trail use. We're also going to be partnering with CDRPC to do some census data analysis as we update our regional travel demand model. And both of our organizations put a lot of resources into the geographic information systems for interactive maps. We're going to be building more story maps and a number of analysis activities. The next group is sort of our what we call our strategic regional planning initiatives. These are things that include the biggest effort financially for us this year is going to be updating our regional travel demand model, or at least beginning that process, possibly expanding it, and possibly either doing a household travel survey or doing a big data purchase to support that work. But that's going to be a major effort because we'd like to incorporate Washington, Warren, and possibly Montgomery County into our model, which would enable us, because of CDTA's coverage area, to have those areas as part of our model. Then we have completing our long-range transportation plan in motion. That's another big initiative for the remainder of this year. We have a proposal in concert with one of the TIP projects, the ITS and the signal work, to maybe develop a quote smart corridor program and develop a scope of work and what that would look like. We still want to pursue the documentation of a carbon reduction strategy. And new for us is sort of investing a little more resources into housing planning and coordination with CDRPC, and looking at ways we can do more regional scale analysis on our housing, whether you call it a shortage, an affordability crisis, or whatever the issues are. we're gonna put some resources into looking at that housing question. Some other activities, continue to invest in complete streets work. We have a partnership with Albany County that will be hopefully working on complete streets. We're also gonna be doing some more before and after analysis of the implementation of complete streets projects, so that we can see the value and the changes before and after the projects get implemented. So that's something we're hoping to invest some time in. For pre-planning, we want to continue to look at this over-dimensioned vehicle issue for the movement of goods, particularly as they relate to very, very large things like wind turbines or other types of very, very large equipment that move on our roadway network. For ADA planning, we are going to fund one of the proposals from Albany County for an ADA transition plan for Albany County. So that's one of the proposals that came in. We're also looking to maybe revise our old bicycle and pedestrian network and transform it into what we'll call an active transportation or complete streets network. So that way, when we are investing in these types of facilities, that we assure or at least plan for a network of them. We're just not doing a patchwork of different facilities that sort of dead end at different points. So that's an effort we're going to be undertaking, and through our U.S. Department of Energy work, we're going to continue to expand our efforts beyond our 4-county boundary for the Clean Cities program.
Sandy, what does that mean? Beyond the 4 counties?
So the technical boundary area for the Clean Cities is 11 counties. It's funded through a different fund source, which is why we could go outside of our traditional 4 counties. The next group is kind of more tip oriented, we'll call it. One is obviously we're working to complete the tip update, and then we're going to restart project monitoring project delivery once we get through that process. So that'll be some effort on our part. We've got to complete an air quality conformity analysis per federal law under the Clean Air Act for both the tip and our long range plans. So we're going to invest some time there. And we're certainly going to continue to coordinate with DOT and other sponsors on the regional PAL studies and any other large scale planning studies that come our way. On the sort of the transit human service safety side, still coordinating with CDTA, of course, on the transit development plan and how that's going to ultimately get implemented, what activities might come out of that effort. We're still continuing to support our New York State partners through the New York 501 and the carpool program. Carrie obviously is continuing to lead, and we're going to finish this year the Capital Region Vision Zero Safety Action Plan, which already has had a lot of influence on some local government activities. We just saw in Schenectady. You guys had a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit that came out of this work, so it's already having an influence on some things in the region. And we're going to prepare an infrastructure resiliency plan for the region and use some consultant resources to hopefully accomplish that. And then the final group of initiatives are our sort of linkage studies or community planning work, continuing to partner with Colony and Malta on the implementation of their generic environmental impact statement work, which involves us doing some traffic analysis and developing some mitigation cost calculations for them. The 3 projects in bold are the new ones, the Albany County Complete Streets Study, which will be primarily funded actually with Albany County funds, hopefully. Then we have the Boston Spa Traffic Calming Master Plan, which is really a safety-oriented master plan for the village and really looking at doing some traffic calming and other things for the village. And then up in the city of Saratoga Springs, the West Avenue Complete Streets Study, which will really look at that area between the train station and sort of downtown where West Avenue and the high school is, to figure out how to implement complete streets treatments given the growth pressures in that part of the city. And is there a way to have a mitigation cost process incorporated into that so that we can have development and private sector contributions to some of the transportation improvements. Many of the linkage studies below that Saratoga Springs one are due to wrap up in this next month or 2. We just are carrying them into the new UPWP just for financial reasons. We just have to show that the final billings are done. And really the Half Moon, Hilton Park County Route 109 study and then the Niskuna Complete Street Studies, these two are really just in their infancy and just getting going down. Niskuna's kicked off. Hilton Park Half Moon, we're going through the process of getting a consultant on board, right now. So that's the content of it, where we're at now. We're bringing this to you today to review and approve, with all the recommended projects that we talked about. We're gonna open a 25-day public review period. On February 6th, we're gonna have a virtual lunch and learn public workshop. The lunch and learn we just did, for the emotion plan, we actually had 20 people attend, so the time of day seems to work for some people. And we can always record it and make it available to anyone who couldn't attend. So the registration link is there on the slide. February 11th, we are opening our doors here for an open house, to talk all things planning and whatever else you might have on your minds. So you're welcome to attend from 4 to 6 p.m. here at the office. Light refreshments will be served. We're gonna send out a press release on this, to announce it tomorrow. And then after following the public review period, we'll edit the document as needed, and then March 6th, policy board will adopt it. So that is the plan for the UPWP, and that is all I have.
Thank you, Sandy. Any questions, comments? Need to approve the draft for release, right? Public
Yes.
25-day
Yep.
review period. Can I get a motion for that? Go ahead.
Howard and Sharon.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye. Opposed, abstained, thank you.
Thank you.
UPWP is out there. Now we have additional changes to the TID project data.
Yes, so since we all last met, as you can imagine with that mountain of data, we found some things to tweak, add to the list, some corrected information, so what you're seeing will add to the actions we took at the last meeting. But represent a few additional projects in the different categories that we just need you folks to act on. One of the things we did was review the status of all the obligations for each project by phase. So what that revealed is that there were actually a few more projects that have been obligated and can now roll off the new tip. So this first group of projects you're seeing on this list represent those that are have all the phases obligated and are have rolled off the tip.
So does this affect money is available? Is this? Oh,
Yeah, so it just formally takes them off the tip, basically. So we just need you folks to act.
Any questions? You need a motion to make these updated changes? Can I get a motion? Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Chris,
Like a press.
all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, thank you, motion carries. These are the proposed roll-ins. Right.
Yes, so we had found a couple more projects that somehow may have been overlooked or missed or had another issue that we discovered over the last couple of weeks, and these are existing projects that are gonna move into the new tip with no changes. These are just two additional that are gonna move in with no changes, so we do need to approve them to be included in the new tip.
I get a motion to that, effect. Chris, get a
Question
second.
relative to these.
Get a second, and then, can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, further discussion, Andrew?
Age of those projects. When did they come onto the tip? These two projects?
Do you have that information?
Can you pull up the tip listing for it?
Judging by the pins, they're both not terribly old.
I don't have those.
Yeah, I think Freeman's Bridge was funded fairly, I think that was a TAP project that was funded in the last round.
It's not real old.
And the Finley Bridge, I believe, is a Bridge New York. Maybe the last round as well, so probably this last 2 years,
Any issues with getting them progressed?
not to our knowledge.
Sandy, I have a question.
Yeah.
If we're awarded Culvert New York project money, should Culvert New York be reflected on the tip or not, because it doesn't go, just want to make sure we're not missing.
They're 100% state.
Yeah.
So I know they like to show them for information only, but there's no federal dollars with this culverts.
So I have a motion, I have a second, any further discussion? All those in favor, aye? Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Okay, now, new draft admin modifications.
Yes, so as you can imagine, these are projects, and just as a reminder, our administrative modification thresholds. So these may have had a cost change that's under $500,000 or a schedule change or some other phase change. They do not have scope changes. But we did have several projects that fit one of those categories that are on this list that also need to be approved to move into the new TIF. The action and the reason for their addition to this list is in the action column.
Essentially, all of these projects are just moving unobligated phases into fiscal year 25. There are phases that hadn't been obligated in FY 22, 3 or 4, and so now they couldn't be obligated in those years. They need to be moved up to at least FY 25 to be obligated.
Any questions? Can I get a motion to approve
I'll make a
these?
motion.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
No second.
For the discussion, all those in favor, aye? Opposed, abstained, motion carries, thank you. All right, now we have a minor amendment.
Yeah.
SA 339.
So we're treating this amendment a little differently than the earlier amendment because it affects both the new TIF and the current TIF. This was just simply an oversight on our part. We missed this bridge when we talked about these at our last meeting. This should have been on the agenda and just oversight on our part. So this is a cost increase of 1.2 million on the Nelson Avenue Bridge Replacement Project up in Saratoga Springs, I believe.
Project done. This was one of 3 bridges in the project, but long and short history is we were proposing to replace 2 and remove 1. Through the environmental process, we learned that it's not tenable. And so now it's a replacement. We're gonna honor the project prior.
This was the one you were gonna move, is that?
Yeah. Now we're,
Public uproar.
now we're replacing it. We're still planning to obligate this prior to the end of this federal fiscal year. So it shouldn't roll into the new TIF and impact the financial balances, even though it costs. So will happen this federal fiscal year.
Any questions, Ray? So we need a motion to approve this minor amendment, SA 339.
Correct. Sharon and.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye? Opposed, abstained, thank you, motion carries. Now we have a major amendment, SA 338.
Yes. This was the, a correction, I believe, just a data error on our part on the, exit 16 bridge project. We just had some incorrect dates and numbers here, so, Ethan, I'll let you explain it.
All the money and everything in 2029 was approved for recommendation to policy board at the last planning committee meeting, but the preliminary design phase was still shown in 2023 with our updated info from DOT. That phase had not been obligated, and like the admin mods, just needs to move into the current fiscal year because FY 23 is passed.
Further discussions? Questions? All right, can I get a motion for this major amendment, SA 338?
Andrew,
Andrew, can I get a second?
Sharon.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained. Motion carries, thank you, moving right along, I think we're setting records for motions. Tip update,
All
here we
right,
are.
so here's the grand result of all of that work. Our team here, led by Andrew and Ethan, have calculated for all of the fund source, the projected roll-in of projects that we've acted on moving into the new TIF and their overall value. If you look at all of the different fund sources, roughly $290 million worth of projects are moving into the new tip. However, the most valued fund sources are in the green. And those are the ones that are competitive that we're gonna be talking about today. When you look at, oops, sorry. In terms of the value of those green ones, that's just under $200 million. So that is apparently what we have available to program today, which is a good news story. Just so you have it for your information. By sponsor, what's rolling into the tip. This is just the dollar value of projects by sponsor of what's rolling into the tip. So you can see there's quite a geographic range. Somewhat because of the programs like Bridge New York that, you know, certainly hit some bridges and pavements and other more rural parts of the region. Some of the urban funds obviously get spent in some of our urban centers. But a lot of different sponsors are going to have an existing piece of our tip budget. And now here's the programming estimate by fund source once again. So our planning target as received by DOT is in this first column. The largest of the available fund sources was the National Highway Program, which largely funds work on the interstates and our principal arterials, as well as some non-bridge work. With some caveats, but somewhat. So that is the fund source we have the most resources in terms of the planning target. The Bridge Formula Program is also limited to the federal aid bridges, correct? The Carbon Reduction Funds, CRP funds, these are limited to what's available in the Albany Schenectady urbanized area. The Highway Safety Improvement Program funds are available region-wide. The Surface Transportation Block Grant Program Flex funds are available region-wide. And then the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program Large Urban is also specific to the Albany Schenectady urbanized area. So I say that up front because what that means is that if your project's on the top of a list, there may or may not be a fund source for it. So this fund source challenge, I'll call it, is what's going to help drive a little bit how we program these funds. And so the next column after the planning target shows the roll-in by fund source. Then there's the available balance after that. So as you can see, we're pretty limited already in some fund sources because of the scale of the roll-in. We have proposed set-asides on the table that we'll talk about, but we just wanted to show you up front, if we were to fund them all as proposed, what's available after set-asides for site-specific projects. And I know this number is a little different than what we said earlier, but it's roughly, we'll call it $190 to $200 million. With the bulk of the available funding being available in this NHPP category, there's very little available in the large urban, limited in the carbon reduction, and on paper, somewhat limited on the Highway Safety Improvement Program side, but I'll let Greg talk later about our strategy with that. So any reactions, any questions about what's available either before set-asides or even after, if assuming we adopt and approve those set-asides? Any questions?
To clarify, so BFPs for bridges,
Bridges only,
right, and NHPP can be used for on-system.
on system bridges and then the NHS system.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
A lot of money that could be available for us.
Right.
What did BFP have?
That's a bipartisan.
Partisan infrastructure bill.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
and it,
like 2 years ago, when it wasn't on the last day.
no,
We just got it after we built the new tip. The last tip came into being at the same time as the infrastructure law was approved. So some of these fund sources weren't available at the point of programming at this table. They were used afterwards. And the state had to work with our federal partners on the guidance. That just took some time to figure out how it was used.
now we painted it out as part of this.
Right.
I don't have a dog in the race anymore. I might just point it as that, so between Bridge New York, BFP and the NHPP being used on bridges. Bridges are really like, and so UPWP, we can talk complete streets and a lot of that other stuff, but the funding for bridges seems to be going up substantially, correct? And then the funding that we have for the other things is kind of
I would view it
Flat.
differently. I think,
flat. Is that what the word? Okay.
yeah, I mean, there's more funding for those categories, but remember, we just rolled in a significant program.
Right.
And I think if we had had more projects completed, there would be more on the table for others. So I think, that message I've been sending, for a few months now is still true. And just, it's a lesson learned for all of us. I mean, a lot of circumstances beyond our control, but
Project.
that's the reality of it. The more we obligate, the more we have access to at the point of tip updates. Okay,
Thank you, Sandy. So moving on, right, you got, address the scope change, the
yep, so
set aside.
since we last met, I'm showing this not so that you can read it, but just so that it's available on our website. CDTA did have a little bit of a revised agenda. Because they wanted to talk about the future use of what we now know as the BRT set aside. And perhaps transforming that into a different type of set aside without a change in the funding value. So Mike, I'm gonna turn it over to you to just kind of present to the group on what your proposal is for CDTA.
Great, thank you, Sandy. You can go ahead and advance to the second slide.
Sure.
So the PRT set aside was created back in the 2016 TIP to progress the design and construction of the region's BRT projects. At the time, we only had the red line in place and we had the blue and purple line still heavily in development. So BRT was a key recommendation of several regional plans, including CDTA's own transit development plan, as well as New Visions 2050, and it's anticipated to continue to be a major component of New Vision 2050. So this set aside has been a critical funding source for advancing this goal. Next slide, please. So some of the benefits of the BRT set aside from a funding perspective, it effectively takes CDTA out of the running for the general solicitation for projects. So it has, rather than soliciting or submitting individual projects, we have a stable, predictable level of funding each year for the duration of the TIP, and we do not participate, compete otherwise. The planning committee also approves all projects that are created from the set aside, which gives us a measure of control over making sure the projects created from the TIP are in line with, created from the set aside are in line with the intent of the set aside. It also ensures that this money is spent. Most of this funding is used for projects that are already in CDTA's pipeline of priorities, and are also in many cases at some level of design. Right now, a good example of this is the red line upgrade. And lastly, it leverages additional funding from other federal state sources and brings that into the region to make improvements, not just for transit, but the general transportation system of the region. The biggest example of this recently was the FTA Capital Investment Grants Program, or Small Starts, which brought many millions of dollars of federal money into the region from a relatively small amount that was made possible from among other sources, the BRT set aside. Next slide, please. So an update on the status of the BRT system in the capital region. We have our 40-mile system in place with 3 lines: the red line from Schenectady to Albany, blue line along the river from Albany to Troy, Cohoes, and Waterford, and our most recent line, which opened back in 2023, the purple line from Albany to Crossgates Mall in Gilderland. So we essentially achieved our vision of the initial network that we wanted to build. We still have stations to build to effectively build what we initially planned, which are 1 on the blue line in Menands and 2 on the purple line in the western part of the city of Albany. Now we implemented the 40-mile BRT network to what I'll call a starter BRT standard, meaning that it has the limited stop service, it has priority infrastructure, it has special branding and upgraded passenger amenities. but it's still operating mostly in mixed traffic. So what we've been trying to do over the past couple of years, and will be a major priority in the coming years, is to evolve the system towards more of what I would call a true BRT, in something that is starting to approach the quality of service provided by light rail system. So with the Purple Line, we opened the UAlbany Busway, which was the first piece of continuous bus-only infrastructure in the region. As part of the Red Line that is being implemented in Schenectady, phase 1 of the Red Line upgrade, it will include segments of curbside bus lanes and also other dedicated right-of-ways around the region. In cities of Albany and Troy are recommended in the bus lane feasibility study, which was also the genesis of the bus lanes in Schenectady that are being implemented in phase 1 of that project. Look ahead to other future needs. Finishing up the Red Line upgrade, we are building the Schenectady segment in the next couple of years, but there's phase 2 and 3 in the DOT segment in Niskayuna and Colony, and then the Albany segment within the city of Albany. And lastly, through our BRT and priority corridor expansion study, we determined that an additional corridor is potentially justified between Schenectady and Albany along roughly the Route 7 and Route 2 corridor. We're not sure when it makes sense necessarily to advance this project. But if and when we are ready to expand to an additional corridor, that will be the next one. Next slide, please. So evolving system-wide needs. Over the past 10 years, obviously, a lot of things have happened and changed in relation to transit and the overall transportation, situation for residents of this region. We hit the COVID pandemic, and ridership went way down to a fraction of what it had been. But since then, it has recovered now to a level that is even above the ridership that we had prior to the pandemic. And we're now actually setting daily records almost every day for ridership. So a lot of the corridors that previously were well below the ridership that we saw in the BRT corridors are now, while not at the level of BRT corridors, they are now at the level of ridership where they justify enhanced infrastructure, even when the BRT service model of limited stop is not the optimal transit solution. Also, CDTA has added several different mobility options that have started to become common over the past 10 years or so, such as microtransit, bike share, car share, scooters, all of which CDTA is now involved in at some level. And these require high quality connections to be coordinated so that you can effectively use each alternative mode to leverage one another. You want the bicycles to be located close to the buses to allow transfer between those modes. You want microtransit to be also integrated. Basically, you need hubs, single points, nodes of activity where these connections can be made to get the most out of each possible one. Next slide, please. So in consideration of these changing needs, our proposal is to change the scope of the BRT set aside to cover a wider range of special transit projects with the goal of improving the reliability, safety, comfort, and ease of use for transit riders in these critical emerging high volume locations. And with this change, the BRT set aside would be redesignated the enhanced transit infrastructure set aside. Next slide, please. Excellent. So new projects that would become eligible for funding under the enhanced transit infrastructure set aside would include obviously all projects currently eligible under the BRT set aside, and the projects that are currently a priority will continue to be what the set aside is likely used for in the next couple of years, namely the Red Line upgrade. But here are the additional projects. First, the design, engineering, and construction of mobility hubs. So again, these multimodal transfer facilities at high ridership locations that are designed to connect the different modes that we offer. Then transit priority infrastructure. Recent studies such as the BRT expansion and priority corridor study, as well as the bus lane feasibility study, have shown that even on corridors that, again, don't necessarily justify BRT as the service model, they do still justify priority infrastructure, similar to what we see on BRT. Transit signal priorities, queue jumpers, traffic signal upgrades, segments of bus only right of way, and so on. Next is street infrastructure at major bus stops. This is somewhat similar to mobility hubs. It's maybe one step down in terms of scale, in that it's not a point that's, it's not, major bus stops would not be intended to connect all of the different modes that CDTA offers. But these are stops that have enough ridership to justify improved infrastructure, even if it isn't BRT, and require some level of civil work. So examples of enhancements we might make to high volume bus stops, new and replace sidewalks and crosswalks, traffic signals, curb bump outs, and other similar traffic calming elements. This would exclude the routine elements of bus stops. So just putting in bus stop signs, dropping in shelters where the infrastructure already allows a shelter, that would not be included. What would be eligible are bus stop upgrades that require civil work in order to accommodate the infrastructure that the bus stop needs. And lastly, other technology infrastructure that supports the entire that supports the entire system, but critically supports BRT corridors and high volume service of high volume locations, such as operating facilities. So we are looking to rebuild our operating facility in Schenectady, the Schenectady Garage, which will obviously lead to an improvement in operations for the red line that comes out of it, but also the various high ridership services that come out of that garage as well. Other things like security cameras, coordination of the regional traffic signal system, including TSP, and also data analysis of how we are doing with these different systems, such as analyzing the effectiveness of TSP and fine tuning that to get the most out of it for our users and all users of the roads on which we operate. These other technologies that support enhanced transit infrastructure would also be included. Next slide, please. So, as Sandy said, although we are looking to expand the scope of the BRT set aside and the projects that are eligible under it, we are not looking for any increase to the level of funding. It is 3.75 million each year, which is the same as where we're at now in current tip tiers 4 and 5. So, although we are looking to potentially fund other types of projects that are non-BRT with the set aside, it does not mean that we need more money in order to fund them. CDTA draws upon a variety of different funding sources, grants, internal money, and so on. What this does effectively is it allows us to be more flexible with what money goes to what project. So, for example, with the red line upgrade, it was initially funded with the phase 1 was initially funded with BRT set aside money. CDTA was able to secure federal Safe Streets for All money to implement that project. So what we were able to do there was take the set aside money, move it to later phases of the project. But once that project is fully built, potentially we may want to use set aside money to advance other priority projects that have similar benefits throughout the region. Next slide, please. So examples of future projects that we might want to use the set aside to fund. Obviously, the red line upgrade, phase 1, which is the Schenectady segment, is currently in progress and will be starting construction soon. Then we have phase 2, which is the DOT segment in the towns of Niskayuna and Colony, and then phase 3 within the city of Albany. Then future mobility hubs. CDTA is the internal goal of building one mobility hub per year over the next, I would say, over the next 5 to 10 years. Right now, we're doing an internal study to determine priorities for new mobility hubs. We have a short list. It's based essentially on ridership, the availability of infrastructure to connect to, and so on. Next, the implementation of the bus lane feasibility study. Now, in this case, it is specific to BRT corridors. the Albany and Troy segments that are called out in the bus lane feasibility study are along the red, purple, and blue lines respectively. But also there are priority measures such as queue jumpers and TSP that are recommended on other corridors as part of the BRT expansion study. Next, the west facility, which I mentioned earlier, this would be a new bus garage for our services that come out of Schenectady, including most critically the Red Line, which is our most used service. Right now, our facility and our operating facility in Schenectady is what I would call substandard. It's quite old. We're basically keeping it running year after year, but ultimately it will need to be replaced, which will allow us to run more service on the Red Line as well as more service on high ridership corridors in Schenectady County. And last, the fourth potential BRT corridor, which would run from Schenectady to Troy, if and when that becomes a priority for CDTA to advance. I mean, this isn't anything outside of the current scope because it's BRT, but that would be a future project that we would potentially look to fund out of the set aside. And next slide, please. Next. And lastly, we would continue leveraging other state and federal sources of funding to bring additional funds into the region. Small starts, the FTA CIG program was the big one for the past 10 years, which we used to build the purple and blue lines. But we also draw upon a large range of other grant programs. Right now, we have projects funded by TAP, Safe Streets for All, most of what you see above. So the set aside money would continue to bring these other sources of funding into the region, allowing us to build improvements to transit, which also has ancillary benefits to the roads on which we operate, and overall allow us to improve the system through much more funding than we would otherwise have access to without effectively the seed money provided by the set aside. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions for Mike?
Yes. Looking at this holistically, the CDTA is set aside regardless of whether it's bus rapid transit or anything. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's always existed to allow CDTA kind of an independent status to do what they need to do to benefit and leverage the money in the best way that they can do, which they've shown historically they can't do. So we create the set aside, call it one thing, but essentially it's a CDTA discretionary account that they can use as they see appropriate, excluding the routine maintenance and elements of day-to-day. So when we establish the funding amount for the set aside, essentially we're taking the request from CDTA to have the appropriate amount of funding to allow them to do what they need to do. So as far as the definition goes, do we need anything more than a CDTA discretionary set aside on a regular basis to allow them to do what they want to do and just exclude the routine elements from it so as to not restrict them from whatever they want to do? I mean, what's getting to the brass tacks of why the set aside exists to begin with? Why do we want to constrain CDTA from doing what they need to do?
I think I would view it a little differently from what you're describing. We're giving them seed money to give them flexibility to do enhancements on the system that they would not have funding to do otherwise. It is unusual for an NPO to dedicate funding in this way to a transit authority from the federal highway pot of funds, but it's been proven to be critical to why our region probably has one of the best transit authorities in upstate New York. And if not, based on ridership, exceeding the odds on coming back from the COVID crisis. So we have certainly valued as an MPO. I don't want to portray it as, they obviously have other resources to maintain their fleet and maintain, the other assets that they have. But these funds are allowing them to do capital projects in communities on streets that have benefits to the community as well as CDTA, but would not be happening without this. So it's a worthy investment.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, Andrew, is you support.
Absolutely.
So I think
But
what we're saying is, I think
but
we're
to be
taking
less
this
restrictive, not.
previous BRT set aside, which was specific to that, and just expanding their ability to do other things on other lines where they see fit. I mean, to me, it
Right, so
seems like a no-brainer.
to entitle it a discretionary set aside for the purposes of giving this sense.
Oh.
That doesn't necessitate you needing to change it over time because it meets the goals of what you're looking for as the game.
It sounds like that's exactly what this is doing is the BRT was restricted to just BRT.
Correct.
This is to expand the scope. So if they find a priority elsewhere.
Mhm.
They
Yeah,
can
the
do it.
flexibility to do so.
That flexibility is really
Yeah.
what we're looking for.
I mean, the key here is to be sure that it's used for enhancements and not just maintenance. I could really,
Right.
which we
And that-
like, we like that. This
would
goes towards
necessitate the
enhancements and
exclusion of
maintenance
those
from the
15
usual
elements.
other normal operating expenses. That's pretty standard, So
So what do we
it's
call it?
less.
I mean, the title was
Enhanced
enhanced.
transit infrastructure
That,
set
Yeah.
aside. It
That's
could be, it could be transit infrastructure set aside, but enhanced implied, I titled it that with the intent of stating that it is upgrade, specifically upgrades, not just to keep the lights on.
enhanced transit infrastructure would be.
so this scope would need a motion.
So
We're gonna
I
take them all at
allow,
once, or?
we'll do all the set asides at once, but I wanted to give CDTA the opportunity to. Explain, the history and what their intent was, because the next action is going to be the whole range of set asides, so.
Which would include this scope
It would
change.
include this scope change. It's not gonna be reflected in the document I'm gonna show you, so we will make that caveat on the motion and includes this re-scope, rebranding of it. But the intent, I think, was well explained.
I have one question.
Sure.
So as far as, with the renaming of it, and the refocus of it, does that now give more opportunities to expand and you have ideas on what potential expansions can go into Saratoga County with this type of?
So I can't speak to, where it falls exactly on the priority list, but with the example of mobility hubs, we already have locations in mind in Saratoga County, that would make them potentially good candidates for mobility hubs. We have, high ridership bus stops in, Saratoga County that require upgrades and right now don't have the infrastructure. So we have a lot of stops in Saratoga County that are just signs in the grass on the side of the road with no sidewalk. And, they might be well used and we might either want to put a shelter in there or someone might request a shelter. And we look at it and, hey, there's nowhere to put a shelter. We need to re-engineer this intersection in order to make. This would allow us to make that possible. Well, it's already possible, but this gives us greater flexibility to make those kinds of investments that otherwise wouldn't be as easy to make because they're not on BRT.
CDTA makes presentations like this every time. I think you were too, Ross, when he made the presentation, talked a lot about leveraging funds
Mhm.
and the 3.75 or 3 point, how that opens up to other funds and the additional funds. So that was a good point to make. It's still the same thing, right? These funds can be used to leverage for future funds as well.
Exactly.
And I think Mike actually undersold it. He said millions of dollars. It's tens of
Tens
millions, if not almost over $100 million at this point. So it's leverage.
CIG was, I think, 40 million. I'm sorry, the Blue Line CIG grant was, I think, was around 40 million and the purple line was closer to 100 million.
Yeah, these are projects that would not have
Now,
happened.
currently,
without-
sorry to
No,
interrupt.
you're fine, you're
We
fine.
currently aren't building projects that are quite at that scale. I think if we were to pursue the fourth BRT corridor, that's where CIG would come again. It would be at that scale of funding. Yeah.
Mike, Sandy.
Thank you.
We talk about.
So, yeah,
Set aside.
so we'll move to the other set aside. Sorry, the text on this one's a little small, but this table shows all the proposed set asides. We did walk through them at our last meeting, but we're happy to do it again. Most of these are, the first one is the BRT set aside. We've been talking about, so obviously we'll be renaming it, but the funding level is as Mike presented. We also have our Transportation Council Project Development Support Line and Household Travel Survey. I may have to rename that only because it may not be a household travel survey, maybe a data purchase. So just FYI. But you know, the ask is the same. This is the same level of support we've had to our operations here in the tip for many years. We have a little bit of reserve for the carbon reduction program. This is here just in case we don't program it all today. I think we will, but in case we don't, we just are reserving that. There's no funding in this now. All of the rest of these are block funded projects or programs that are managed by state DOT, ranging from pavement markings to traffic signal replacements, the health program, the management of the TMC, guide rail replacements, miscellaneous items of preservation work, culvert replacement program, pavement preservation, signs, and curb warning signs, which is a specific program for the Highway Safety Improvement Program. And then there's 3 proposed, so in that table earlier where I showed all of this of us potentially funding all of the set asides, that estimate included these 3 proposed projects. These 3 new ones are an implementation of our SS4A or the Capital Region Vision Zero Safety Action Plan. We're trying to reserve $2 million of seed money to maybe go after and leverage, just as CDTA does, for other types of safety work that will come out of that planning effort. Then we have the state's pedestrian safety action plan upgrades. That too would use HSIP funds for this new set aside, really gets to the vulnerable roadway user issue. And then the third is the traffic signal consultant set aside for hiring some help, I guess, to look at our signal systems in the region, looking at opportunities for coordination, looking at opportunities to enhance the corridors. And this funding, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, would be open to all.
Yeah, the idea is
Sponsors.
open all sponsors and cross municipal boundaries. Not sure how we want to take the set aside. Do we want to take the, I guess, the usual suspects first and then the 3 separate, or do we want to take them all at once?
That's really up to the discretion of you folks. If anybody has any concerns about the 3 proposals, we can certainly talk about them. We can act on the first group first and then talk about the new ones.
Questions on the. Wait until old ones.
Sorry.
Questions on the new ones, just wait until.
I'll take the new one second.
Okay, we'll take the new ones separately, for sure.
So the old ones, I will say, this table shows a lot of state money rolled up into the table, so the total of 136 is a little misleading. DOT's set aside ask is 75 million of matched federal aid that count against the tip. The curve warnings is $6 million of statewide funding, so it's on top of outside of what we're programming today. And then the state funds add quite a bit to the total, so the DOT requested 75 million. The last tip update, we were around 80 for the 5-year tip period, so we're actually trying to reduce a little bit the 8 county portion that we program here. So yeah, we're trying to just ever so slightly reduce our block fund request this time around. So, any questions for us on our usual roll up of multi-county work.
So want to take the existing set asides first,
Sounds like it.
and then the motion, the CDTA's scope change would be with the new.
New title.
And but we'll do that with the new. Ones or the existing?
And we'll do with the existing.
With the existing, okay.
How did the previous set aside request pan out? Was it pretty much on target? Did you have an excess?
We definitely spent all of the prior set aside,
Okay,
prior 3 years that we was programmed.
We're looking for a motion to approve the existing
Make a motion.
set asides with. Which includes CDTA's. Scope,
Rebranding.
rebranding of.
Yep.
The BRT, so I have a motion, thanks, second, Andrew. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. You opposed, abstained, okay, motion carries, thank you. So now we're moving on to the proposed 3 new set asides that were just discussed. It's like most of the money, Greg, there's pushed out to 2030 for the one, the construction. Is that like you anticipate that being like
That's,
sections of sidewalk or certain, I mean,
so the Safe Routes for All is intended to, and I want to, Sandy proposed this one, but this is to get after recommendations from the Safe Routes for All. That's rolling up, nearly complete. And that's really for safety money can be used on any route, and fortunately, the systemic rules that allow the use combined with the Safe Routes for All process lend itself to, I will say this is probably for local road access to safety money to get after the implementation of the recommendations out of Vision Zero.
so who would request the funds? How would this work?
So from a practical point of view, when we see the recommendations, which are still being developed in the Capital Region Vision Zero City Action Plan, that will inform if we use these funds as a opportunity to solicit for a capital project. We use it to assign to an education program. It gives us some flexibility.
Be a solicitation.
Possibly, I don't want to say it's a guarantee, but possibly. It can also be used as seed money and for other kinds of opportunities. But we just want to make sure that there's something in this program, because we're putting a lot of energy and effort into building this Vision Zero Safety Action Plan, and safety is probably our top priority, that we have something in this tip reserved for implementing that.
It can be small projects.
It could be very small, it could be very systemic in nature, and it's on the same scale as the pedestrian safety action plan. So we just took a note from DOT's book on scaling this at an appropriate level that we thought could be useful for something, but without having the specifics in hand, because as I said, the plan isn't complete.
And so the part 2 of that, as much as Brandon denies that pedestrian safety action plan, this is for us to build on our prior pedestrian safety action plan efforts that brought all mid-block crossings up to a new minimum standard, and then 50% of the signalized intersections up to the new minimum, which is countdown timers, no turn on red, additional signing, field of pedestrian, all the things you see out in the world of signal upgrades we've done. This is to now go hopefully further and identify locations that could use traffic calming features, whether it's medians, curb islands, potentially RFBs, or other enhancements, again, all out of the Federal Highway Safety Toolbox, to get after crosswalks and pedestrian features that I guess we would say are identified needing said traffic calming features to make them a more safe and useful crossing.
So the earlier money is, we anticipate would be designed.
The earlier one is design, and we're putting the 1.5 million we're calling it, I guess, a lump sum implementation pot to do a multi-site project we're putting it in the fifth year for now because there's so much evolving in how to learn and implement these things that we don't want to put the money early and miss it. We want to put it in fifth year. And if we do get after projects, we can bring the money forward and deliver a multi-site pedestrian safety project. But again, it's intended to be multi-site to be efficient. We hope.
Mhm.
That's the idea for that. Any questions on that?
Yeah, for the consultant signalization set aside.
Yeah.
Would you envision an inventory? Of signals? I mean, or would it, the onus be on a municipality to identify an area and present it as needing further study?
So the traffic signal set aside, consultant set aside is. We have, both of us have done efforts, Andrew's done efforts, and even we have done efforts at top congested corridors. And of course, they generally involve traffic signals. Can we get after both new technologies, I guess I'll call it, maybe not necessarily best available technologies, but proven technologies that can help traffic flow cohesively in a corridor instead of old-fashioned retiming that drifts apart and doesn't last. But we need a consultant on board that can really model these congested corridors. And we also don't want to end at municipal boundaries because traffic doesn't end at municipal boundaries either. So, you know, let's march down Route 5 strategically. Let's march up and down these corridors, you know, where they cross boundaries. It's gonna require a lot of coordination and understanding the consistent equipment and maintenance, and there's some complexities. But we want to get after cohesive corridors of retiming, coordination, technology, upgrades. And honestly, these also generally have transit, so I'm sure will be a component that get rolled in on that end too.
Okay, so it provides a broadened approach and consideration of not just congestion mitigation at, say, a particular intersection, but looking at the endemic
We're
causes of that.
trying to get to a corridor. I mean, this is the lowest hanging fruit to make the network operate more efficient.
Okay.
That's the idea.
And Sandy, on the first set aside, so say a municipality has an area identified under Vision Zero for further study, or it's a good candidate for implementation of redesign. Where is the separation and the set aside from the request for full funds for that project? What is the set aside envision to do relative to implementation? As compared with, hey, this is a TIP project that I need to submit, but can't right now.
So part of that answer is going to come from the recommendations in the report. There's a range of potential things that we could do with this. One specific example might be we hire a consultant to help communities establish the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit, if that's what. Maybe it's not the traditional capital project that you're thinking of. But maybe it is. Maybe the analysis shows there's some particular systemic program of signs of something that's lower cost, similar to the pedestrian effort, that we could leverage for that. I don't mean to sound vague about it, but I think once we see what the results are from the safety plan, it will inform what we do with that. And you'll also note on the table, there's a reason why I skipped the 2026 fiscal year for these funds, because we wanted to complete that work, have some time to think about how we would use it, bring that to the table here for discussion, and then access it later on down.
Do you happen to know the percentage of signals that can be either retooled or upgraded in a way to create the corridors that you're talking about versus they just can't be upgraded anymore, or needs to be replaced in percentages?
On the state system, we have very few signals that we can't tweak, upgrade, whatnot. There's a handful left, but you know, Two of them are getting replaced in the Clifton Park corridor, they're very old. There's a few others, but most of them, I mean, already our crews are running around putting video detection everywhere we can. But we're trying to get ahead of our paving program so that when we mill out a loop, we don't need it anymore, so the camera will take over the detection. So that's the simplest thing we're doing everywhere. You know, the state system, we're in pretty good shape on technology. The local system, I know, is a mixed bag of hamster wheels, cogs.
Yeah, we got lots.
Yeah, things that, you know, so. But I think on the corridors we're talking about, to most locals system, is at least up to on the congested corridors, I think, without getting into too deep of an analysis.
So now we're looking at a motion to recommend 3 new set asides as presented.
I'll make a motion.
Dr. and Howard.
Motion, I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye? Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. Now for the easy stuff.
Now for the east step, I am gonna turn the wheel here, so to speak, over to Andrew.
Okay.
And talk about the site-specific projects.
If I move this up there. a little bit.
Yep.
Okay. So. We've been very busy this past couple of months, scoring all of the tip candidate projects. What you're looking at now is a list of all 61 candidate projects that we received in the solicitation from everybody. And in this sheet, we have them grouped together by category. So you can see at the top here, we have all of the bike ped projects listed first. And if we scroll down, we can then see all of the bridge projects are next. And then the handful we received in the congestion freight air quality category. We have 4 projects that fell into the other category. We had 4 fall into complete streets. And then the remainders were in the pavement only category. So we sat down and we worked very closely with NISTOT to come up with our best estimate of how much funding will be available for programming these new projects from this list. And that's this table at the bottom of the handout, blue table, where the column on the right says available after set asides. So it sounds like all the set asides are approved, including CDTAs. So that column is our current best estimate of how much funding we can spend on these new projects.
For those listening remotely, it's the same table we showed at the beginning where we had the goal and balance remaining.
Yes. So some fund sources have very little funding available. Others have more. So we have about 53 million in bridge formula program main funding we can spend. We have about 100 million in the NHPP. That's the biggest fund source. And then STBG Flex, we have about 27 million to spend. So knowing that, what we recommend is programming by fund source. Since we know we have the most NHPP available, we fund all of the projects that are NHPP eligible using that fund source rather than one of the fund sources that has less available funding. I'm just gonna hide this column now, actually. So what we did last week was we sat down with DOT and we added some columns over here, these blue columns. These are the 5 funding sources that are also listed up in that same table. With the block grant program, with the Flex and Urban just combined into one column. And we worked with DOT to come up with what we feel is the preferred potential fund source for each project. So as I said, we have the most funding available from the NHPP. So if the road was on the National Highway System, or if it was a bridge that we think can get the NHPP funding, we put a yes in that column. If the project wasn't NHPP eligible, but was block grant program eligible, we put a yes here. Many of the bridges are bridge formula program eligible. And these last two, HSIP and carbon reduction program, we have very little available in carbon reduction program. And we have about 5 million in HSIP, but as Sandy alluded to earlier, DOT thinks we may be able to over program HSIP and park projects in the 5th year, and bring them in as they're ready to be obligated. So we sat down with Greg and DOT staff last week, and we just did kind of a first pass on funding the highest scoring projects in each category, respecting what we felt was the preferred fund source for each project. And we put together what we'll call kind of a first draft program, just to use as a starting point for planning committee, just so we're not starting from scratch. And so what we're looking at here is what we came up with last week. So the projects that are highlighted in green here in this column, these are, again, just, we did a quick first pass. We think we can fund all of these green highlighted projects within the available funding that we mentioned earlier. So just as a starting point, if we choose to, we could fund the top 3 scoring bike ped projects, which would be these 3 here: Sands Creek, Gilligan Road, and Western Towasenta bike path. Moving down to bridge, so we have a lot more funding available for these bridge projects. As Chris mentioned earlier. So we worked with DOT. A lot of the projects in this category were submitted by DOT and by Saratoga County. So we highlighted, again, working with Greg, what their preferred projects were, skipping some of the bridges that were lower priority for the state. And then we also added in the top scoring local bridges as well. In this case, I believe we have 3 in the funding program here, which were Saratoga County bridges. And you can see with the DOT bridges, we did jump around a bit again, just to honor what DOT was saying were their higher priority bridges. Moving down to the congestion, freight, and air quality category. So these projects, there were a handful of roundabouts or intersection reconfigurations. There was a ramp reconfiguration as well. You might be surprised so many are highlighted, but what Greg suggested is many of these are HSIP eligible, which is this column here. And Greg, I don't know if you want to talk about the HSIP and our strategy with it.
Yeah, this is probably a good segue to that topic. Each year, the regions are asked for additional HSIP eligible projects to obligate quickly, which is never, you can't sprout a roundabout in 3 months and go delivered. So the idea here is if we program more safety money than we have left available, I mean, by the planning targets, we have just over 5 million of safety money remaining in the 5-year tip. But if we place the over-programmed HSIP in the 5th year of the tip, but design early, which some of these have actually already commenced design, some have not. But if we place the construction in the 5th year and the project is ready, we're near a PS&E. There is a high degree of confidence we can move that into whatever year project is ready and obligate and help the state spend the safety money, as that is actually a requirement based on the performance metrics of safety. All states are in a safety requirement that requires them to spend 100% of their safety funds each year. And this will help that effort statewide. So that's why we're making the suggestion to over program safety money beyond the 5 million we have remaining today.
So we're way over.
Yes. To the tune of, I'd say, 20 to 25 million over program. If we park in the 5th year.
Yeah, if we do all of these, we'd be programming about 24 million in HSIP total.
Construction. So some of these would start advancing design with the hope that money is there for construction.
Yes, when they ask, can you deliver it? The answer will be yes, we can move it into the 4-year step. You know, it's the stip's 4 years, the tip is 5. So we can roll it into the 4-year step. With the assumption that it's not getting spent elsewhere.
Oh, sorry, it's to the left here. So two were Town of Half Moon, we just chose to fund just one from that sponsor. The rest were from other sponsors.
Well, and the other reason is the second project is not HSIP eligible, it's STBG eligible. So,
Route 50 intersection, that is a town project.
yes, Town of Wilton, that's a design only from the last tip update. And they have determined a roundabout is, or roundabouts, plural, yeah, thank you. Are the near the preferred alternative, I can't say they're pretty much the likely to be preferred alternative, to the pair of roundabouts.
The wooden Route 50 in the town of Wilton BDOT.
It is, but it's a local priority. So we let them go and proceed and design, and it mitigates their efforts in the area. So we support locals making improvements.
So everything that was HSIP eligible essentially was.
Yes, everything in this category and I don't feel that there was projects in other categories that would be HSIP, except maybe the bike ped projects potentially.
And those are partial, there's a different conversation there. The only other one we suggested funding was the $770,000 on Hoosick Street because it's NHPP eligible. It's not a ton of money, but it is on the NHS. And it's intended to get after a identified, I guess, I'll call it bottleneck. This won't solve all the congestion on Hoosick Street, but it could help.
This was one of the short-term recommendations from the linkage study that I just completed. Extension of the right turn lane into the Walmart.
It chokes down the one lane and it goes right back to 2, so it's like, well,
Yeah,
take
that's
that,
a horrible,
take
it's a
that.
horrible right turn, man, because you don't realize that it ends.
Right.
So,
Looking at the other category, so I believe these two were just approved for funding as set asides. DOT had put in applications for them. So actually, while we're here, I can just put in, I believe this first one was going to be NHPP, and then the second one was going to be HSIP. So I'll just add those in. I don't know if I can color them green. It's up here somewhere. Possibly I could just,
Yeah, that's, you had it on the dump the paint, you just have to change the color.
yeah, like I'll
Yellow.
steal the green from over here if I can. Okay. We had two other projects fall in the other category. One was from Town of Guilderland, from Kill Basin Analysis. This was a flood resiliency study. We talked to DOT about this one, and we're not sure if it's federal aid eligible. They weren't asking for much money, but because it's looking at a very large flood basin around Stuyvesant Plaza, a much larger area. But I don't know, Greg, if you know more about this, but we didn't think it was STP eligible.
Yeah, we understand when you guys are seeking various colors of money for this from anyone, but since it's gonna study so much private property, it's hard to just the federal eligible category, even though it affects a federal one. So we're not sure we could bring it into the eligibility of federal.
You know, historically, everything in that location has been looked at. Well, get DOT to replace the box culvert on the western, problem goes away. The problem doesn't go away downstream.
Right.
And replacing the box culvert under West Virginia is not a small project. So a few months ago, we had this moment. We said, why don't we start looking at what we can do to slow the flow of water to that intersection? I mean, that's been a flood area for 200 years. And it's not gonna get better.
And we know, I know there's some other correspondence about seeking non-federal fund sources to get after the study. Let's go in different directions. But we can talk more offline.
I mean, we have a commitment. We have an existing commitment for 50 grand. We have a potential commitment for another. The 50 grand is money good. We have a potential opportunity to get another 100 from what I'll refer to as an interested private sector party. So, well, we gotta get this started. It's time. It's past time.
Yeah. The scope is so much private property infiltration that it's hard to, so we can talk more offline. Yeah, find a federal source that's that challenge.
Okay, moving on to the road projects. So again, just as a first pass, we said, what if we fund the top 2 scoring complete streets projects, and then for the pavement only, funding a handful of these, again, skipping certain state projects to reflect their preferred priorities, but funding the top scoring. I believe we are funding every single local pavement projects that came to the table. So again, we worked with Greg to do this as a first pass. If we fund the projects in green, let me, I've got this little pivot table that sums it all up. But I need to refresh it. So this is how much money we would be spending. First, in this exercise, we grouped the NHPP and the Bridge Formula Program projects together simply because there were so many bridges that could use either of them. So we will kind of move funding between those 2 fund sources for the bridges, which makes up the bulk of this category. Just for this exercise, we grouped them together. So those together, the current funding scenario has 159 million in total, which is just a little bit more than the 153 million that we have in the planning targets. For the STBGP, this proposed funding scenario, about 26 million, which matches how much flex we have. We have a little bit of urban left over as well, so we'll pick one of the STP funding projects that happens to fall within the large urban area. We'll use the urban on that, and we'll use flex on everything else. And then HSIP here, again, as we discussed, we'll overprogram this and park things in the 5th year for Greg's preferred strategy. So if, as it stands right now, we would be funding about 31 projects from the solicitation here. I can go through this list again if anybody has any questions or wants to make any proposed changes or shift fund sources around, and we can update the table. We have a second table here that shows all of the 31 projects in the proposed program. Let me just refresh this and how many each sponsor would be getting and how much funding they would be getting. So I will note this doesn't have any of the roll-in projects in this table. This is only the new projects. So you would need to add this to the roll-in table that we shared earlier to see how many projects you would have on the new tip in total. Any questions? Go ahead.
I just wanted to see the bridge system. Were there any bridge projects that other put in? If there was 3 Saratoga County and there was a lot of DOT, I just didn't know.
Saratoga put in a lot of bridges. Looks like there was one from Greenfield, which I think this was a culvert maybe, and we have no here for this one, Greg. So we didn't think this one was eligible for NHPP or BFP.
Yeah, I think Culver would have to be on the federal aid system to be eligible. And we check that this is not a federal aid system.
So this might be a good candidate for Bridge New York.
Correct.
And we had one other from town of Sand Lake, which it looks like we did skip down to make sure we were funding one other local bridge, and not just all of Saratoga counties. So we are giving Saratoga County 3 and then Sand Lake was the only other one that we felt was a local federal aid bridge.
Now, not to complicate things, but I know flew over quick. I'm not sure how we want to proceed to category by category.
Yeah, that's up to you guys. We can do it by fund source as well, or category by category.
So for the ones that aren't funded, what happens to those?
Well, they wouldn't be placed on the new tip.
They would, we would, this is not a reflection on the quality of the proposed project, where we would be hopeful is, we do anticipate a TAP CMAQ program this fall, so anything that's not funded here would be a likely candidate for that. For the bike ped, certainly, for bridges and culverts, we do anticipate a future Bridge New York solicitation, so anything that's not funded here again would be a candidate for that program. For some of the other project types, we can assist the sponsor with identifying other possible fund sources, particularly under any remaining federal funds under the bipartisan infrastructure law, or any state programs that maybe, now there's transportation is getting outside of the traditional world of DOTs. So, sometimes DEC might have a program or some other entities, so we can assist you with identifying other potential resources for some of these projects.
I think that makes.
Sure.
Go down your list.
Upper level.
I mean, I think it probably makes a lot of sense. I mean,
Sure.
Some of these projects are probably great. You look at Sim Smith Trail, though, it's $13 million.
Right.
I mean, how are we gonna fund that?
Right.
So,
It's just,
right.
yeah, the money's just not there.
So the first category, I guess. They're just in alphabetical order here, bike and ped only.
And that's.
So we had a lot of interest in this 10 of these. Yeah, and I guess, DOT indicated they're all STP eligible, and then you can see in the HSIP column, we get some yeses, some partials, some maybes, and that's just due to the nature of these projects, sometimes joining a federal aid road or leaving the federal aid road, or being kind of a mix. And then again, we think many of them are CRP eligible as well, but we don't have a lot of CRP, and I think our strategy there was to try to take all of the CRP and spend it as soon as we can on projects in the existing program. Because we don't know the future of that fund source.
So it's funded, these three would be funded with STBG funds?
Yes,
Would HSIP money come in at all, Greg, if something becomes eligible, say, okay, well, we can use 100% or not? Does it make sense to do that?
It depends on the proportion of the project that's HSIP eligible. The pedestrian safety action toolbox is, but if a very small portion, then that's not what the effort is getting. It's just more efficient to use one fund. We find the portion grows and it's a lot more HSIP eligible, we try to use it too. It's kind of a mixed bag there.
Got it. So we're
So for
looking
the bike
at
ped
3
category-
projects that are proposed to be funded, STBG. Any discussion on these, and
I'll make a motion to approve.
get a motion to approve? Mark, do I have a second? Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstained? On these 3 projects like that. Moving on to bridge.
okay. Bridge, I think, was the biggest category, a lot of interest in the bridges, but mainly from NISTOT, Saratoga County, and there's two other local bridges as we saw.
Any logic to your DOTs? I mean, Greg, these are the
Right.
priority ones you guys just wanted to
So in
get
this,
at?
yeah.
Is that the,
Yes, we put in several bridge candidates that not knowing how things were gonna shake out. And
yeah,
seeing how they shake out, we have our internal priorities, so the DOT illustrated ones represent the DOT high priority projects that we're looking for funding. One that is gonna be, we'll figure out how to deal with later, is the last one shown on this screen, the New York Route 4 over the Hudson River in Northumberland. It's $25 million, which is approximately half of the project value because it's in two MPOs. We need to put this on one tip at some point, because having one project on two tips just doesn't work. We can show it on our tip here. We'll figure that there's details of how to show it on our tip later. But we would probably show the entire project funding on the AGFTC tip, as this is considered more regionally significant to our friends to the north. And we would show the amount here as a placeholder to reflect the funding, so that we all still see it in our tips. It's half in this area. You cross an MPO boundary with a singular project, it's interesting.
Or cross over the Hudson multiple times.
Yes, it crosses in Troy to Waterford, and then again from Northumberland to Fort Miller,
Yeah.
from Saratoga to Washington County. So just north of Schuyler, though, it crosses back. And this is honestly our highest priority bridge project to get funded based on condition.
first four?
Yeah.
This is just a mix of the BFP main and the NHPP.
Yep.
Basically. Programming all at 150, so on.
right.
Saratoga County had weighed in on it, so they're.
So
Not yet. For now, we just have their top three scoring ones highlighted here. So if you wanna,
yeah, I guess, I mean, this is the first time I'm seeing it, so, at this level, so I know the number 35 one was our number 3, the number 42 one was our number 2. But then when you go down to today, that's our number 7, so kind of, I'm just trying to flip through some of your just funding as far as, kind of if we needed to swap it out, so, because our number 1 was the Table Road over to Duwaska, but, that scored fairly low at 6.9.
this one,
Yeah,
That's immediately adjacent to
to the,
the Northway.
yeah, the 87 one. So
And that's your number one.
that was on DPW's number 1, so it was kind of, when I saw the DOT listing that said 87 with the Duwaska, I was,
Something we're finding with these culverts over a creek is DEC is looking at the creek holistically. We have a situation in another county where we want a very similar Northway culvert, downstream culverts on local roads. Without getting too much in the weeds, we have to look at the system holistic. And if that's your number one priority, that could play into a systemic approach here to keep our environmental partners happy.
so would you like to swap that out for one of the bridges that's highlighted up here?
I mean, does that have to happen? If we approve the green as it is, and after further discussion, Saratoga wants to come back and amend something that.
This will be the draft
Yeah,
program
it'd
and
be
we'll
like,
have
they
it,
could, an
There's a public
opportunity,
review.
yeah.
an opportunity to come back and say, well, we'd rather. You're saying it's more complicated maybe than they were thinking, is that what you're,
or maybe more options.
I think what we have to keep in mind is the fund source eligibility here and the dollar value of the proposed package of bridges that have been assigned, so, you know, if you need to go back and talk to your folks.
Yeah, I was going down the list to see, okay, where's another 1.1 that's, you know, maybe further down the list that's. Fits in, but you know, that's. a cheaper one.
For NHPP. Wait, my bad. Cable Road is not.
No, that's too much.
So this would, if we approve this today, it goes out to public comment.
Yeah, this is not the
Like a
final,
30 day,
final,
Is there like a public comment?
absolutely,
And obviously policy.
correct. Policy board's gonna see this twice, so there is time to. Adjust, but I just, again, wanna reiterate. You do need to look at the fund source options here. Because there may be a candidate that is the county's highest priority for which we don't have an available fund source.
Yeah.
So that's kind of just the key thing.
One thing to note on the pivot. In rolling up fund sources, since we haven't. We're showing. 3.5 million of CRP available, 27 of flex and almost 4 of larger than. Those three combined total 35 million,
Okay,
and we're showing of. SDBG, which could be SDGB or CRP.
Yeah.
Showing 26.
we have a little bit of, yeah, more programming capacity with the STBG. I wasn't sure if you wanted to put anything into CRP now or just hold on to that or,
We might as well, and then as we build the tip, we can switch it to put it in the earliest year.
okay,
But all in all, we can, that second line, we can program to 35 and be comfortable.
okay. This line here,
Just food for thought as we roll.
okay,
$35 and $42 more. It's our second and third, so that's.
Ethan has it.
So far, Sandy, we're looking back at approving the bridge as proposed.
Yeah, I mean, to move this along, we can approve this as draft. If the county wants to take a look, and we can have a follow-up conversation before, certainly before the policy board meeting, because then we can make an adjustment there. And release it for public review at that point, if the committee is comfortable with that.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mark. Second. Any further discussion?
Just how does the South Mall Bridge tie into the 787 study?
We have reduced the scope to be truly element specific. This is work to simply keep it safe and operational, and we've actually. What we did is we reduced the scope, but spread it out to cover more of the area. To get after the elements that we need.
You can address immediately.
Discussion, we have a motion and a second on the proposed bridge funding. Those in favor, aye. Opposed, abstained. Motion carries, thank you.
Okay,
Down to,
congestion freight. Air quality, I think we talked about a couple of these already. And again, the strategy here is everything that is HSIP eligible. We fund and park in the 5th year and move forward. When ready for obligation as we're able. And then the Huzik Road being less than $1 million and on the national highway system, we throw that one in as well.
by park in the 5th year, is that? No design or anything in the earlier years, everything is.
I think the design could go in the earlier years.
Yes.
There is 5 million at least in HSIP for that. And some of these are current design only projects, I believe. So
Current.
on the
They get
current,
under design.
3 years ago, we gave them
Okay.
design only funding, I think for the Malta and Wilton ones.
So ultimately, we'll want to have a preliminary design, this would move into final, but the construction will start the fifth year.
If they're ready to go, is that one of those things you can?
Yep.
Well,
Yes.
Right.
Precisely.
Alright, any discussion? You got a- is that a motion?
I was gonna make a motion to approve this. A second.
Check. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye? Opposed, abstained, motion carries, thank you. Other,
Moving on to others, so again, two of these we just approved as set asides, they were applications, but we put them to the set asides instead. From Kill we've discussed, and then NICE had a request for a design only project. We threw this into other, because it came in kind of at the very end. Greg, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so the Pell study we're wrapping up to publish it as final, in the near term here. We would like to progress into the NEPA process, once that Pell is published. To further the design along and continue to identify discretionary, competitive or other solicitations to, advance implementation. But we would like to continue the preliminary work because all the things identified through the Pell process need to continue further along through the final process. And so we're looking for preliminary design money. I know this is,
6 million for preliminary design.
yeah, it's
Complicated little bridge.
it's a lot going on.
So is
And,
that to achieve a preferred alternative?
yeah, we can't achieve we can't officially achieve a preferred alternative until we identify the construction funding, but we want to get it as close to that as possible. And which sets it up for a very competitive solicitation or who knows.
So moving forward on this design. Presumably you have an option that you want to progress.
We haven't arrived, the Pell study narrows it to 2 replacement concepts still. And we want to work through those 2 and eventually narrow it to 1 with true, a much more detailed set of plans and impacts and mitigations. So that we know exactly what we're going to build.
Just like 40
On that
bridge.
It's more, add a 0.
Yeah.
400.
Yeah,
And
300,
that would allow you to,
Support, so I saw that, but
300 to 400 million is the total project cost eventually, hence it will never be funded at this table. It's gonna require fund source from elsewhere.
so ultimately, design a $400 million bridge is gonna be.
Yeah,
They usually say 10%.
in
10 to 15%.
at some point, when a project gets
So big.
incredibly expensive, you sort of hit a ceiling on your design.
I think consultants would argue.
It's a juicy contract.
No, we have to have our heads examined. We spent 40 million on design on this thing, so.
so Greg, with those 2 alternatives in mind. Utilizing those as the target essentially for this design only. Would that allow for modifications of those elements?
For sure.
Okay,
Those are very preliminary. I know there's been feedback on one of the intersection configurations and,
there's a lot.
yeah, so that this would get much deeper into the weeds on. Hashing out the things that we know are outstanding is, that need more detailed analysis, so. In the realm of leveraging money, this is one of those things that could hopefully leverage hundreds of millions of dollars in the future to get after
And that could identify the viability of takings if necessary.
For
Because-
sure.
Okay, because that's something that's been tried to be avoided throughout the process.
Yes.
But I know that the viability of keeping that South Troy area available for certain potential planned activities, economic development wise, certain things need to be considered that hadn't, I use Siri. That I don't think have fully been fleshed out.
Yeah. Once we move to the next phase, the coordination with both cities and the communities would recommence.
Okay.
And, you know, and another thing to note is we've looked at through feedback is to the west. There's, again, it needs more analysis, but the idea to actually remove the bridge over Route 32, so we reduce that infrastructure and make that an at-grade intersection. And then proceed up the hill with a reconfiguration that could possibly bring a bike facility up to the road diet at Route 377, because it's sort of disconnected right now. So we're really trying to make a cohesive corridor as part of the massive bridge project. The bridge itself is the lion's share of the project cost. These other things are.
And it's parked under other just because it's a continuation of the Pell, it's not a bridge project.
I think because it's design only, we don't want to make it, if we put 6 million in the bridge category, this would score to infinity on benefit costs. But it doesn't show the full funding, so we can't.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to compare it to all the other bridges which were
Yeah.
getting construction.
Full
Yeah.
funding.
Gotcha. Right, then, any further discussion? For a motion to approve the 3 projects in the other category.
Is the deal we look at, I'm just observation, Hudson. Is there any talk about how you consolidate the Hudson River, or are they all just such a large mass? I mean, it seems like the bridges over the Hudson River you're getting into the billions,
Yes,
because, okay, this is a lot.
well, of course, we look at the potential for consolidation of crossings, but the crossings immediately local are all very high volume. And if you take one out, the others are
Yeah.
over capacity. To the north, the problem becomes spacing. If you take one out, the detour is incredibly large and impactful to all parties. You know, so when we look at this, there are bridges to the north over the canal that might be redundant, but they're outside this area. But, you know, we look at this.
What did Sam used to say, like, we have the most bridge deck square foot in the state and region one, is that what we had?
Second only to New York City.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the second, New York City.
Yes.
And just to clarify, Steve, oh, sorry, we're recommending funding the one, we've already funded the top 2 in this list, just to clarify.
Oh,
the
that's
motion.
right. That's
So we're really
great.
just funding the one
Fine.
project, 378.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mark.
I'll second.
Further discussion. All those in favor, aye. Opposed, any abstain? Thank you, motion carries.
Okay. Moving on to the roads complete streets category, we had 4 applications. All pretty big ticket projects. And just in this proposed funding scenario, we chose to fund just the top 2 out of the 4 that we've received. So this would be City of Cohoes and City of Albany, their complete streets projects. And I believe we have City of Cohoes being funded with block grant funding, and then City of Albany's was on the National Highway System, so that one we would use NHPP instead.
Discussion.
We did apply for build, it's their program that's up there. For them to raise.
This is a great project. Some of the roads are federal aid and some are, I think Forbes wasn't. So you can see we did talk quite a lot about this one. We think it's partially eligible for certain fund sources.
But it's not, essentially not eligible, is that for the bulk of what they're asking for, is a problem?
I think the work on Washington Ave and on Broadway would be,
Work.
I think we talked about the Washington Ave extension and we weren't sure because that would be a little bit of a new road. But you could say that it was a reconfiguration. Forbes Ave, we don't think that's a federal aid road. So it's a mix, but I would say probably more than half. It's not the federal aid system.
But in other words, you're just not getting close to that. Hang on, but.
Without knowing the exact proportion, half to 2/3 is on the federal aid system. Or 1/2 to 6.
I had a question about the Cape River project. It was kind of, there wasn't a ton of complete street aspects to the project, and I was just curious from a scoring standpoint, did it not score as well because we weren't able to like propose adding a sidewalk throughout the whole corridor or a bike lane throughout the whole corridor? Did the other projects have more robust complete streets aspects to them?
I think so. I think the other projects earned more merit points because of that. I think Ethan's got the score sheet here. I don't know if you can look at the benefit cost ratios of that one compared to the other ones. But yeah, for the complete streets projects, half the score was benefit cost and half was merit. And I think this one just scored fewer merit points in a couple of the categories.
Yeah. Yeah, of the, I think 12 or 15 possible complete streets, merit points only earned 4, and the benefit cost ratio is only 6.3. So just I got some low scores in that category.
So again, I think it's a great project. But just in this category, these were all pretty high cost.
When it's NHPP eligible that we're funding, is that?
Washington Ave, yeah. Goes again HPP for that.
Any further discussion? Further points? I guess I'd be looking for a motion. I'll make a motion. We have a second. Motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye. Anyone opposed? Abstained? The last category, right?
Final category, this was the roads. Pavement only, we split this out from the complete streets for projects that were just paving. Not touching the bike ped infrastructure. So we had applications here from NISTOT and from Schenectady County and from Saratoga County as well. And we funded, again, working with Greg, he let us know what his highest priorities were, and we funded them. I think all of these are on the national highway system, so we're using that 100 million in NHS on most of these, NHPP rather. And then we also are funding all 4 of the local projects. I just believe because 2 of them, the Schenectady County ones were pretty low price tag, and the Saratoga County ones. We wanted to fund some local projects for pavement only, and those fit into the budget.
So county's gonna have a big nut.
Well,
They're gonna pull it, be able to
if
pull
the
it all
county
off.
can advance these projects, then that's good to use the money, but
Correct, so it's just one slope right, is the pavement slope?
It's the fastest growing county.
It's not getting awarded, I just.
Yeah, it's the side slope holding up the road, so it's to stabilize. We run around and we have some minor ones and major ones in this. It's one's identified as a priority, but not super high yet.
If that's eligible, so I'm prepared for the road above, it's fine.
But we are skipping it this round. This.
It's like,
we could.
I put too many of these things together, well, you know,
We can look that up for you.
yeah, I got.
Yeah.
these are, all these have been sorted by ranking, Andrew.
Yes. But I think the ranking in this category was moot because we funded all the locals and then DOT.
Yeah, I just didn't know
We funded
how-
which were, that's how they're ranked,
Pulled out.
the highest to lowest score.
You know, without
What part of Route 67 is this local?
priority. I'm good.
Well, we've got the mile markers. I don't think that's gonna help you.
Across the Bennington Battlefield.
Yeah, this is Route 67. It's out in Rensselaer County, so it's almost to Vermont.
Okay.
Something we've fixed a few times in an interim fix. It's holding, so we're okay to defer.
Questions, comments? Motion, thank you, Chris. Second. Second. Great. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Staying. Carry.
So with that, that'll form the project list for the draft tip that will bring to policy board and then release for public review, and then we'll have a chance between the draft and final to make any tweaks that anyone wants. So right now, we've got 159 million in NHPP and BFP. So Greg, we're below that target of 35 million that you said you were comfortable with on STBG and CRP with the draft program.
Is it fresh on that? I thought
We haven't added anything.
Confused on that. You're saying there's 9 more.
If we lump together the STBG Flex, large urban and the CRP, then that is 35 million in total. So I hadn't lumped those together yet, but Greg, you're saying we should treat them together?
we should treat them together. Because then after the fact, what we'll do is we'll swap something in the first year that's urban to CRP to spend it ASAP.
No, and in fact, I would recommend we stop here. You know, as you guys know, we're still in the 25 fiscal year, and we know that there's existing projects that probably are gonna come to the table down the road for changes, so it's better to have a little reserve for some flexibility in the surprises that come up, than to try to program every dollar right now. And we're in a very good place. Reserving 5-ish million is probably a good place to put the pencils down. And we'll deal with the carbon reduction funds with these new assignments and looking at the existing set of projects as well to make sure we assign that fund source to something that can be spent sooner than later. And this is again draft, so, you know, we'll share, the results of this meeting's actions with all the sponsors, so they know where we stand. When we have our policy board meeting in March, we'll obviously give folks an opportunity if there's a change or tweak or question, whatever comes up, we'll address it at the meeting. And then it will be released for public review. The other reason we traditionally have reserved a little funding for that public review process, because things come up. So it's best not to program every dollar at this point as well for that reason.
All right, and thank the staff for all that work. Putting it together, very helpful. Moving on to discussion items. Emotion plan update. Sandy, you want to-
Yeah, it's safe.
Okay, so this will be super quick because we are running long today. Just a quick update on the plan. We had that lunch and learn yesterday. The video recording is now available on the website. If you were unable to attend and you want to attend. Our third survey is open now and it'll be open through the end of February. The link on the slide brings you directly to that survey. We encourage you to fill that out. As I mentioned earlier, we're having an open house on February 11th here to talk about all things planning. Refreshments will be served, light refreshments. And then we are really moving into the decision-making phase now of the plan. We're finishing up the needs assessment. and the modeling related to that. We're gonna be building a financial plan and really getting into developing policies and strategies over these next couple of months. And we'll be releasing a draft plan for review as of June. So there'll be a lot of work. The task force will be starting to meet monthly. And we're really kind of getting into the heart of the plan development now. So stay tuned. We'll be sending out monthly updates through our newsletter. And then task force members will be keeping you obviously involved as well. So.
I just said.
Yep.
Summary of the 22-27 tip amendment modifications.
Yeah, there was just a few more, I'll call them minor tweaks to the existing tip projects that we always show for transparency. One of which was related to the Zim Smith Trail, which was a change related to some increased costs in the design of the trail, in the nature of $400,000. And the Delaware Avenue Complete Streets projects in Bethlehem had some fund source tweaks, I'll call it, with a minor adjustment. This was accounted for in the figures that we just went through earlier for the record. That's it.
Can I ask a question? All honesty.
Yes.
Is there like a master plan for the Zim Smith Trail that I could find online? Because I feel like I've been at this table for 13 years. The Zim Smith Trail has been for 13 years here for like these just huge amounts of money. Right?
Yeah,
And
we
like,
actually have
but
a
I didn't
map.
know, is there like
Yeah.
a plan of how much money it would take to build out the Zim Smith Trail? Is it like a $50 million build out for this thing?
Well, I think just to do the northern section, now they're finally narrowing down kind of selections and areas to go, so hence the 11 million. So that's kind of the first swat at it to see what this body felt. Of course, you know, in looking at all the other things that Saratoga County is looking to do. Then, you know, going forward, you know, some of the CMAC have funding as well, right? So,
But there is a document I could find.
you know, there's a feasibility study. I know they did it when they first started, so.
Yeah, that's something we can have them come and do a presentation on.
Yeah, I would just, you know, when Mike was here, it was always a tip, you know, Zim Smith Trail was always the big thing, I always busted on him, because it was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
Zim Smith Trail, and now it's still here, but I just don't know, like, you know, I know about 787 and all the things we want to do there, right? And we know about some of these other ones, but the Zim Smith Trail, I'm just not familiar with like what the extent of it is it to go from the south to the north of all of Saratoga County and
Yep, so right now it currently ends and buses on Oak Street, and so they are looking to the different avenues to get to the New York State Park in Saratoga Springs. So I know Jason was here with our consultant
Just looking to
last
see
January, so.
if I can pull up the map or that Jason shared with us quickly. While this is loading, we can come back.
All right, so we're moving on. NISDOT project delivery, Greg.
I didn't, knowing the long meeting, I didn't really glance at too much, but our 146 over Norman's Kill was let and I believe awarded. And that includes the multi-use path that actually will connect to what we just in the draft it shows the Western Town Center bike path in the town of Gilbert. So for the draft it, we just funded the connection to what we're building as part of the project we just awarded. That's the big one. River, oh yeah, get to that later. Okay.
Just real quick, since it was brought up, I found the map of the alignment of the Zim Smith Trail, so folks can get oriented. This section is adjacent just to the south of Boston Spa. And it winds its way through Malta up into Saratoga Springs, and I'm not sure the exact endpoint. Can do you know the exact?
No, they're still trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
One part of the kind of part of the big holdup for us is having to do environmental assessment. So
Right.
So that, you know, that added to, you know, additional funding that was requested.
so the red's in place. Or is that what you're trying to fund?
this section 4 is design. That's what they're working on now. They are seeking the construction funds, I think, for phases 3 and 4. if I'm not mistaken. I think that was the tip application, correct?
I don't know how that tip application matches to this map, but.
Okay.
Because you want to pull up the application.
Sure, thank you.
I'll give you a sense of what their plan is.
Moving on, Sandy, status of regional planning activity.
Yes, so aside from the things I've talked about, actually, you know what, in the interest of time, I think we've talked it.
Okay. All right, then regional local planning updates, transportation council, you're moving on. Is
Similar,
that,
we'll move on,
CRPC, Mark?
The Northern Border Regional Commission's Timber Transit Program is up and it's a grant program to fund the construction of bridges and other transportation infrastructure out of wood products. We have paused our work on the comprehensive climate action plan funded by EPA temporarily, hopefully. We will be hosting a training on the Capital Region Indicators website at the end of March, so keep an eye out for that. And we are going to make a presentation to our technical assistance project group, story map and other technical materials on the feasibility or some information on the related to the development of a regional reuse center. Next week, that's it.
Then you mark CTA, Mike.
Yeah, only new business for CDTA actually deals mostly with another MPO. In April, we're planning to bring the Glens Falls service that we added to CDTA into our fare structure that we use here at CDTA. Right now, they're still following the fare structure they used to when it was GGFT. There's actually a public hearing on that tomorrow up in Glens Falls. Once we have implemented the fare update in Glens Falls, our plan is to start planning for updating the route system in Glens Falls. Again, most of that is in the AGFTC MPOs area. However, the upgrades to the routes will almost certainly include a connection into this MPO's area, and probably Saratoga Springs, possibly Albany. So we'll have benefits and affect users of the transportation system as well.
I start, Greg.
Uh,
And
Yes, and real quick, one topic that we're gonna get the word out here as soon as we plan this, but we tentatively booked a May 15th session for local program sponsors of all federal aid programs. At the DOT office, we're just, again, very early planning stages, but we want to reinvigorate the spring training we do with local sponsors and their respective consultant friends. So, you know, if there's a topic of note that you all are interested in learning about, please email myself and Guy. We're assembling frequent questions ourselves, and we're trying to assemble like a half-day training session, refresher, you know, anything to help our local sponsors learn anything or refresh any topic of interest. Again, May 15th. We haven't really announced it officially yet. This is a tentative, but we booked the room and we're trying to put something together. So stay tuned for more.
Just so that you can bring it back to your colleagues, that's the same week as the AMPO statewide conference.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
Hard thing to book, but
Okay,
Thruway Authority, yeah.
I don't have anything, but say that I'm having a meeting tomorrow to get the information.
beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Albany County Airport, we still don't have the right.
No, I do believe they selected a new planner to replace Connor, it just hasn't been publicly announced.
Or.
They.
Right. Anybody, local government, anything you wanna add?
There's one more thing I can add about the Zen's Group. I knew one, I thought one portion was on rolling in from this tip as far as construction wise. So from Oak Street to Malt Ave, there's funding for the construction of that.
Please note upcoming meetings, events, Human Services, we have a new meeting, Transportation Council Open House.
That's the one I
we
was
just talked
referring
about.
to, yeah.
Regional Operations Safety Advisory Committee and Policy Board is March sixth. Next meeting is.
So we have tentatively reserved the February twelfth date for an additional meeting of this group, but congratulations, we successfully got through the tip. So we don't need to meet again, until April. So thank you, and thank you all, sponsors, members for working through this process. I know it's a little dry, but it's one of the more important things that we, do and have influence on.
Big thanks to the staff.
know.
Hard to-
All the staff members, absolutely, and DOT staff as well.
Great, and we are adjourned, right?
The motion to adjourn,
Motion, all right.
Howard and Chris,
All in favor, aye?
thanks, everybody.
Oh, thank you.
I'll make the minute for that.
I was gonna go through.